Happy New Year, crappy old government, let's go. After repeatedly refusing to answer whether or not he uses private healthcare, Rishi Sunak said,
I have used independent healthcare in the past.
But the question is, why did it take him so long to admit that? Because there's nothing morally wrong about being rich enough to afford private healthcare. But just like any other privilege, it does create a responsibility to at least try and balance those scales so that other people have a fair shot. But people like him, who have no intention of balancing those scales, they see calling out their privilege as a moral attack. And when it's pointed out to him that we wouldn't have these NHS strikes if the government was willing to at least discuss pay negotiations, which is what the unions have said, he says,
We've always been clear that we want to have constructive dialogue with the unions.
Which is total bullshit, because he then goes on to say,
That is also why, when it comes to the issue of pay, we have accepted in full the independent recommendations of the pay review body.
Which means that you're sticking to the pay recommendations of the people that you appointed, so you won't be budging on pay at all. I wouldn't exactly call that constructive dialogue. And his usual excuse for the state of the NHS,
COVID has had an extraordinary impact on health services.
Even though the number of people on the NHS waiting list had grown to 4.4 million before the start of the pandemic and is now at 7.2 million, so clearly COVID has had an impact, but you were still running it into the ground before that.
We've already eliminated 2-year wait lists.
As I just said, things have been getting worse during your 13 years in power, so any improvements you make are just undoing the damage that you've done. And in defense of the new laws that they're passing to allow employers to potentially sue unions who go on strike and even sack NHS staff, he says that in other countries,
they ban strikes on blue light services. We're not doing that. All we're saying is that in these emergency services, patients should be able to rely on a basic level of life-saving care.
But we haven't got a basic level of life-saving care. According to NHS nurses, in 83% of their shifts, there aren't enough nurses to look after the patient's needs. And only 25% of shifts even had the number of nurses that were planned for those shifts. Which are just some of the reasons why, according to the Office of National Statistics, 1,000 more people are dying a week than usual, which makes Rishi Sunak's choice of words here a bit on the nose.
We're on track this spring to eliminate those waiting 18 months, with a clear plan to go further, to eliminate those waiting 52 weeks by next spring. If we want to safeguard the future of our public services and make sure that our young people inherit a strong economy, we must be disciplined on spending and borrowing.
That's funny, because your Chancellor said that the NHS is funded through tax revenues that would disappear following Brexit. And, oh, would you look at that? £40 billion in lost tax revenue because of Brexit. Meanwhile, you've raised the tax burden higher than it's been since the Second World War. I just hope that you have the self-awareness to not blame Labour for not having enough tax revenue.
It's the same old Labour, Mr. Speaker. They always run out of other people's money.